Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Comic Book Hit List. I am Cool Ty, joined with my boy over there, Steve. We have a great show for you guys today. We just want to let all of you guys that are joining us for the first time know we are Comic Book Hit List. We have great conversations about comic book stories, creators, writers, artists, publishers, the whole nine. We talk about storylines, we talk about character development. So those of you that are just joining us for the first time, welcome. Also, please make sure you share, like, subscribe, leave all your comments down below, and we will definitely do our best to get back to them. We've been doing this for some years, and we just simply love having conversations about comic books and expanding the industry to the best of our ability. Today, you guys are going to really like this show. We're going to be talking about the number one draw to comic books today. That is the man, Jim Lee. I think we all know that there are amazing, amazing, talented artists and writers all over the comic book industry. But if there's one man who slaps his name on a cover or slaps his name as the interior artist that draws the dollars, that draws people going and ordering it in droves, it is Jim Lee.
100%. His stuff flies off the shelves. And he's number one now. I think he's been number one for a while. He just has this ungodly staying power. And we're gonna try and dissect and dive into that today, because I've got a few theories. I'm sure Ty does too. But he's just, as Ty said, there's so many good artists. Why is it that Jim consistently is at the top? His books sell. He has risen from, one-time artist at Marvel to now the chief creative officer, at DC. That's unheard of.
Right. Everybody has their opinion, so please make sure, leave your opinion in the comment section below. We can keep this conversation going. Make sure you invite your friends to join us. All of those wonderful things. So without further ado, let's get going. We all know who Jim Lee is. Jim Lee started back drawing when he was very, very young, probably as young as Rob Liefeld back in their late teens, early 20s. He was originally going to be, correct me if I'm wrong, he was originally going to medical school.
Yeah.
And if I remember the story correctly, he decided to drop out of medical school and become a comic book artist. And of course, indicative of a lot of Asian families, that was not received well, but look at the outcome now. He is now the number one draw to comic book industry. And I do mean in every sense of the word. He creates his pencils to make sure that when he puts them on bristleboard, everybody, plus their grandmother, grandfather, great uncle, everybody goes to the comic book store and picks those things up. So the question is, why does he do it? Why, or how, I guess, how does he have this staying power for so long? We could talk about how Rob Liefeld have the staying power and how people hate him, but you don't have that same disdain for Jim Lee. For Jim Lee, it's all like he literally was the golden boy. And I know part of the conversation we're going to talk about today is he actually had to leave Marvel and DC to go to Image to create what he has right now.
Well,
so
part of it too is your comment about Liefeld. Of the Image 7, the founders, Jim Lee is, he's probably the golden boy, but he's also super nice in real life, professional. We've both met him. He's always very professional, very much, he's just not controversial. So
right.
That's definitely part of it. I think he does have opinions, but I don't think he goes to the lengths that I think some of the other creators from Image did. And he's also very talented.
Very talented. And so Jim Lee, and I would be remiss if I did not say that part of Jim Lee's fame absolutely positively comes from Scott Williams. I think his inker, his embellisher, creates another depth to his art. And I just believe that across the board for all pencilers, that if they just happen to have an inker, that matches their style or has the ability to keep that style going and not lose a degree of focus, of clarity, of digital, whatever you want to call it, that it just expands that person's art. But, today is all about Jim Lee. So we need to know, Jim Lee started back doing Uncanny X-Men. And those pages, actually all the way back, let's go back even further to
Yeah.
Alpha Flight,
Alpha
right?
Flight, Punisher.
He did some Alpha Flight, did some Punishers, and those pages were really good. But we know that was early on in the stage. By the time he started doing X-Men, the number one X-Men, not Uncanny, his style had been refined to the current Jim Lee style that we have right now. And I'm going to use that word refined very loosely because I honestly feel after he refined that, he went to Image and refined it even to another 1,000 degree to make it even better. Here is one page from Wildcats. And again, since we are all about making sure you guys go out and pick up, if you don't have a run of Wildcats, probably 1 through 25, I would say it's probably time for you to pick up a run of Wildcats 1 through 25. Good writing. Again, this is the type of writing that I think a lot of comic book stories are kind of get us into the industry, that they're just fun stories. There are a lot of fighting, a lot of there's a lot of emotion is trying to be injected into it. I think some of it was a little bit dry because they were kind of starting off, getting into their groove and basically creating this entire universe from the ground up. So of course we know they made mistakes. Of course, they had bumps and bruises. But this is one of the pages that always kind of speaks to me. When I look at this page, and this is kind of one reason why I felt him having to leave Marvel and DC, actually all of them, to be honest, why they all had to leave Marvel and DC to go to Image and start is because they had to begin to create and find their own identity. And for me, this is a page that really creates some of Jim Lee's identity. So if you look at the very top panel, right? If you look at the characters in the very top panel, you see, the palm tree leaf, and you see the little guy over here with his feet up. All of this shows, even can't get all the characters' names in it. Even the woman in the background, all of this shows just absolutely clarity. It's detailed. Even though it's a battle scene, it's not overly cumbersome. It's not overly beat down with action and things going on. You can literally look at this as a photograph. Even if you look at that middle panel, you see the middle panel there. But if you look down at that bottom panel, this is the part of Jim Lee's art that I think kind of he supersedes everybody else. Even if you look at here, you have the energy burst hitting I want to say Demonite, if I'm saying that character correctly. If you look at him, you just look at how it's bouncing off. Even the debris and the stuff bouncing off has depth, has feeling. And I think that's, for me, one of the things that really creates an extra special something with Jim Lee's art,
I agree. I think his Wildcats run really went up a notch after he left Marvel when he was doing X-Men. But I'm glad you brought up the image time, because that was also around the time that a very important cartoon came out. X-Men, the animated series, also came out in 1992. So you put that together with Wildcats. Hear me out here. The style is very reminiscent in the animated series of his X-Men.
Absolutely.
It could be, it could be a little bit of a hybrid, but definitely there is inspiration there.
Oh, easily.
And you've also got the Marvel trading cards and the X-Men trading cards. So he's also crossing over into another medium. So why this is important is because when we were all kids, so I would say the last at least 2 generations that have grown up, even without knowing it, grew up with Jim Lee.
Right.
And now they have excess cash. And so they may still be buying books, but they may be buying other stuff that he's producing right now.
Right. I remember being in, San Francisco, being down at San Diego, um, trying to think of some other cons, maybe Texas, being at some of the other cons where early on, and I think maybe around the early 2000s, where I think the con goer began to pick up and begin to spend more money. I think that was a time when you actually had the ability to go to these cons and pick up some really cool free sketches. I know this is a union that I got from Isotope in San Francisco, and I always wanted to get something from him that was a little bit off the beaten path, something that he might not do often. And I know Union is a character that I really liked. So for me, getting him to do that union was just really cool. But also, they're just sketches upon sketches upon sketches where he has just taken these particular pieces and just basically made people's dream come true, right?
This is definitely my favorite of the sketches that he had drawn for me. And keep in mind that he does these sketches in minutes
Yeah,
with no point of reference, with not knowing it in advance. And more often than not, he'll do what you ask, which again goes back to his professionalism. I think I did ask him one time for an Omega Red, and he had to defer that one. But yeah, I can't. I don't know anybody that could do something like this so quickly with this level of detail. It's that just speaks to his talent, and that's just on a small scale. We'll get to some bigger scale stuff
yeah,
that he's done recently. When you're going to cons and you have the opportunity to meet artists, back in the day when we were frequenting them more often, people would be okay with doing them if they had the free time, and there wasn't a large line. And he was always one of those guys that he would definitely try to accommodate.
right. And I think that kind of went a long way with being a really cool dude, being someone who's always willing to chit chat and talk you up. When I talk about Jim Lee being able to bring the dollars to the industry, I look at people who, such as Michael Turner. I look at Mark Silvestri. Um, I look at Ivan Reyes. These guys these guys in no short order bring the funk when they put pencil to the bristle board, right? But they still just cannot reach that next level to where Jim Lee has kind of put himself up at the top when he's doing his art.
And I don't think it's just that he's putting himself up there. Other people that are making the decisions are, right.
Hmm.
When he got put on X-Men with Claremont, I'm sure that wasn't all his decision. When he went to Wildcats, that was probably all his decision.
Right.
Right. When DC bought Wildcats and Image, that was probably partially his decision.
Hmm.
When he went back to Marvel for Heroes Reborn, that was probably mostly his decision. But they needed someone that could elevate the book right then and there, and they picked the right guy, right? So really
Right.
it's his skill level. There is timing, but also people believe in him, and I think that's part of it too, because he did Fantastic Four on Heroes Reborn, right? He did
Right.
Fantastic Four, he did X-Men, so he's already done the two most popular teams in Marvel. So
Right.
that's the other thing that we need to establish, is that the other artists that you have mentioned, Silvestri, Reyes, they Reyes, I think, to me, is known for Green Lantern, who has not always been that popular. Mark Silvestri, he he did a little bit of Uncanny also in around the time that Jim Lee was doing Uncanny.
Hmm.
But what else has he done that's popular in the mainstream?
Right. And don't get me wrong, I am not scoffing at his Uncanny, and nor will I scoff at his new X-Men, which was also another great run. But again, it still didn't reach a certain pinnacle in sales as if it was if it was compared to interiors that Jim Lee was doing. And I say that being a very big Mark Silvestri fan.
If we just look at their trajectories, if we look at after Silvestri, did that new X-Men, which is a very short run. It was only 4 issues. It was the end of Grant Morrison's run. I believe he went back and he did more Top Gun stuff for his own line, which, to be fair, that's his baby, so that makes sense. Batman that he drew is like the classic Batman, for the modern era. There was a lot of hype around his run, right? Because he had not done anything in a while consistently.
When he was at Image and he was, creating his own, really creating his own brand, it just made everything that he did just so absolutely positively amazing. I think in order for us to really have had a really sexy, powerful Batman, and for us to have really had a over the top Justice League, he had to have left DC and Marvel, created all of this stuff at Image, created all of these amazing covers, and then when he went back and did the Heroes Reborn stuff, it just made the pot that much sweeter. When at Image, these guys were producing some of their best work. I actually think that Divine Right was actually taken. The idea for Divine Right was actually taken and used to make what's the guy with the equation that worked in the computer, worked in the technology, the computer, the TV store, and he got this image into his head, and now these people are after me. He's been protected by the CIA.
Oh, Chuck.
Chuck.
I think he definitely honed his skills and refined his skills at Image. I think by the time he got back to DC doing Batman Hush, he was, as far as drawing goes, I think he was at the height of his powers. I think he had reached his the top, and I think he's been there ever since.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is he's a good businessman too. I mean, he sells Wildstorm to DC. He then goes to Marvel, then goes back to DC, and then he does Batman Hush, he does All-Star Batman, he does Superman in between that. He does another 12-issue run of Superman, which not as lauded, and then he does All-Star Batman. So he's been there ever since, but he's been just killing it there.
Yeah.
And now he's been elevated to this new position. Once Jeff Johns, I think, had stepped down, and so I think he does part of the like the publishing as well. So he's got, I think, much more creative control. But we go back to his art. I mean, his art has still been consistently good since Batman, and so he's just been in the limelight for years.
Yeah.
Right. So he's got this top position, but he's got the game. He could back up the talk.
Right.
I think that was something that, for me at least, when you're thinking of comic professionals, what have they done before? Like what qualifies them to be in this higher level position?
Right.
And for Jim Lee, it's like, well, he's done all these iconic characters. He started his own company, and he was able to successfully sell it. I mean, it's sort of like he's a total package. I don't know how else to say it.
Right. I mean, if we're talking about art, this is for me a page that speaks volume with his splash pages, but speaks volume with his action, how his lines move. It almost looks like the page is actually moving. If Jim Lee were to do a Kickstarter, right? Jim Lee's Kickstarter would be equated to what Ice-T did when he did his death metal band. He didn't go to the record companies. He didn't go to any distributor. He created a CD with his band. He put that bad boy up online for $99.99, and it blew the doors off of everything. And Ice-T would tell you up front, a lot of rappers will tell you, the game is to be sold, not be told. And I think Jim Lee has figured out how to sell that game. I'm looking at this page, and if this was a page on a Kickstarter, on a book that he's working on, and let's say the characters weren't as known, they were all creator owned, I would still be flocking to this. If you look at Robin, if you look at his entrance into the page at the top left corner, coming down, his facial expression is energetic. When he lands and he strikes at Green Lantern, he is striking at Green Lantern with the exact poise of what a martial artist looks like. This is the type of pencils that Jim Lee is putting out that makes people go, how in the hell did he do that? I mean, if you look at Robin's face, I know exactly where I'm striking because I've been trained. And if you look at Green Lantern's face, I am just in awe that this kid just did this to me, and I wield one of the most powerful weapons in the entire galaxy. It literally is just unheard of how his art flows on a page.
That was a really good description of how he just works like a master. I mean, it is uncanny just as far as how he could put things together so well and make it dynamic and make it look fluid. And even in those sketches that we showed, you could see a little bit of that, even though they were just sort of static headshots. And I think that's part of it. Is his style is just universally accepted as being good. When most people, pick up books, they're looking at either someone that they really like on the writing side or the art side, right? And on the art side, it's like a specific style. It's like a grim and gritty, like a painting style, maybe like Alex Maleev, or it's like a lot of super detail, heavy detail like George Perez or Jeff Darrow. Right. But with Jim Lee, it's like everybody picks Jim Lee as one of their top artists, right?
Right.
And so is it all of those things together? Is it, what is it? That's the real question, right? It's, there's so much that he does. It is very consistent, but also it's like, what is it that you gravitate towards?
Right. As I'm looking at this from Wildcats, what I'm really gravitating towards is not the energy pulse that's going away. I'm gravitating towards her face of despair and his face of, I'm never going to give up. And for me, it's moving. It's creating that emotion. Like, I mean, I guess the only way I can say it is it's HD, and it's creating that emotion in you. So you're right up to it. So you can really see every detail. I mean, that's how I see it. The dude
that was a lot of detail.
That was a lot of detail.
I agree. I was thinking emotion too when I saw that page, and he does emotion well. He does action well. He does pinup posing well. I mean, it just seems like he does it all well. And yeah, he's got superb team with him. Scott Williams, Alex Sinclair, and he does backgrounds well. He does just the fluidity of everything blending together. You've got that high def, like you said, and then the action and the poses. I don't want to say it's flawless, but I think it's pretty darn close to
pretty darn close.
It's pretty darn close to flawless for a universally good style that everyone can appreciate, I guess I would say.
Right.
We both appreciate a lot of different styles, right? And I think a lot of people have a lot of different opinions as far as if I were to pick someone else, like if I were to pick Ivan Reyes, other people might not like his style. But with Jim Lee, it's like, again, everybody appreciates his style. I think there's a few, I did read there's a few other professionals in the industry that don't necessarily appreciate his style. But again, to me at least, that's a different perspective. not being professional, not having any iota of a talent to draw at all. Um, but yeah, I think it's just he's just universal.
Right.
That's all
I
it
mean,
is.
I look at this page, and if you look at Batman's left leg, Batman, I know for a fact he's not cemented to the ground, which is what I can see with a lot of other characters. When I look at this pose of Batman, I know Batman is getting ready to move again because it looks like he's getting ready to move again. Right? Would you agree with that? He looks like I'm getting ready for my next three moves, so be prepared.
Yeah, and Superman, it looks like he's walking towards him, or he's in the middle of taking a step,
Right.
and Batman's already thinking about his next move. He's probably in a half step ahead.
Right. And you made a comment earlier or just previous when you talked about his backgrounds. I mean, look at the spent canister on the bottom left and, on the bottom right next to his right foot. Look at the walls that have been destroyed. Look at the plumes of smoke that are going around. But if you look further into the background, right, top left side, you'll see the building structure, the church in the background. Even you'll see how the detail has been put into the pieces of debris that have been chopped away because these two have been fighting and the explosions have happened where Superman is continuing to go, and the debris shows that intricate detail of, okay, if I'm going to do a splash page, I'm not going to do a splash page of two major characters with action, right? This is not about two major characters with action. This page is about what happened when these two clashed in the middle of a city street.
There is there's a lot more there in between the lines that happened, and part of it is you got to use your imagination, and part of it is what Jim Lee has conveyed through his drawing. It's just
Right.
destruction, and there was a big battle that went on, and he could do that, and he could do what we saw on the All Star Batman page. He could
Yeah.
actually show the action happening.
Right. Right.
So again, he does it all.
Yeah.
But going back to again, what I was saying earlier about his longevity, along with his consistency, is you've got that great timing. I mean, he's got this skill. People have a need for that skill, so he gets elevated and elevated and elevated until he's where he's at now. And currently, he's doing. I don't know if you call them sketches.
I the word is that I guess they started off as sketches, but now we know these 60 sketches in 60 days are all going to eventually become covers to variant books or books at some point. Let's be clear. I mean, at this point, he's sold 15, I think. Maybe he's up to 15 sketches that have sold, and he's easily on his way to making well over $500,000 at this point. But it is not unheard of that he's going to reach the $1 million mark with these sketches. The only draw to the industry. He's not the only draw, but at this point, we agree, and I think a lot of people would agree that he is the big draw, the most important draw to comic books.
Yes, I believe so. There's no shadow of a doubt of that. You've got other artists doing the same benefit right now, this charity auction style, and I think Jim Lee's just blowing everybody away. He did have a head start, but
Yep.
he's just blowing everybody away with, here's one of the more recent ones he did, the Batman Who Laughs. And if you think about that Gambit and Doctor Doom that Ty showed earlier, if that was like a sneak peek, if you will, of his full potential for a sketch, this is realized potential. This is
Yeah.
this is it right here. You've got the pose, you've got action, you've got the background, everything together. This is one of my favorites. I really enjoyed this story, and so for him to do this character is very unique. And yeah, he just, as far as taking it to another level, he just, whenever he does stuff, it just seems like he takes things to the next level.
Can I draw everybody's attention to two things, to two easy things? I want to draw your attention to the water droplets on his hand and the water droplets on his hand and the rain as it's hitting him. Those things all have a feel. Those and I know a lot of other artists oftentimes would just kind of leave it to, well, it's just water droplets. Whereas
Yes.
something comes across in his brain and his whether it's mechanical and it's just, it's kind of like breathing. Well, if I'm supposed to breathe, this just happens. Well, if I'm supposed to draw, this just happens. These things aren't left to, they're not inconsequential. They're actually purposefully drawn to create that essence for the entire piece, right?
That's a very good catch. I didn't even notice the water on his hands, but it makes perfect sense. You're 100% right because it's raining.
Yes.
So if there were no water dripping off of his hands, it might not look. You might not catch that, but the
Right.
fact that he paid attention to that, and like you said, whether it's mechanical or whether he had to think about it, that only enhances it even more. Especially if you're someone that pays a lot of attention to detail, you could just appreciate that, right?
Right. We were talking previously about he was originally in medical school. If his sketch that I showed, that was mine and Steve's, if the sketch was a Band-Aid, this is surgically precisioned, operational
He's doing brain surgery
technique.
here. He's
Right.
doing brain surgery.
This is a technique that you have to fly around the world to get to. So you will make sure that you make it through surgery. That
Yeah. On second thought, I wish he was a doctor right now.
Something Steve and I talked about the other day was the prices of his sketches. The question is, well, we can't afford those sketches, but the reality of it is, and Steve, I want you to elaborate because you had a good point on this. Are we supposed to be buying these sketches if they're for a particular thing? And in this case, to bail out some very needed, to bail out these comic book shops who need the money at this time, even now that we're dealing with with this Corona pandemic.
And this, I'm glad you brought that up. This goes back to, again, my point about his timing, his business acumen, on top of his skill, on top of the fact that he could do this. He knows how to use his powers for good. That's what he's doing here, right?
Yeah.
He could easily sell this and make money and keep it and buy another Ferrari or whatever, right? He probably doesn't need the money. He knows that comic stores are in dire need right now and they do need the money. And so he knows that his art can be very valuable. And so you put all that together, you've got this, again, it's just, he just knows how to pull together this perfect storm. It may just seem like he's drawing to people that don't know him or that haven't read comics. They're just, this guy could draw pretty good. Okay, yeah, maybe he should auction it off. That's one level, yes. But at a higher level, there's a lot more going on there. And back to that comment I made in our thread. If anyone were able to buy this, he wouldn't be doing it. It wouldn't make any sense, because for the amount of effort he's putting in and the amount of time for what the output is, the amount of money required to sustain these stores while everything's closed, it would be endless. It would be pushing that boulder up the hill and it rolling back down. It wouldn't make any sense.
It would be 60 sketches in a month.
It would be more. It would be 600.
Right.
But the fact that he can command 5 figures, maybe more, for these, again, so-called sketches, that's exactly why he's doing them. I stand by that comment. I think that the average person is not meant to have this. If you have that extra money, then and you have the desire and you think it's great, or you think it's a good investment, then it makes sense to buy it. But for the average person, it's not supposed to make sense.
Go down, and correct me if I'm wrong, they will go down in history.
Oh yeah, I mean, they've already made history.
Right.
That's a fact. I mean, I think the X-Men #1, they've I think the record still has not been beat. I forget how many millions of copies it sold, but that's never going to be beat. Well, it's very unlikely it's going to be beat. And that team is iconic. History's already been made there. I think to Ty's point about his Wildcats and Divine Right, definitely not as well known, not in the mainstream as much. Although the Wildcats cartoon was pretty good.
Wildcats cartoon was really good, and I know those guys gave up some stuff, but I wish that would come back.
It was good. It was good. I mean, it wasn't the X-Men, but what I'm trying to say is that yeah, those books that he did, his original creations, they're also worth picking up too. They're also a slice of history as far as being his creations, as far as being some of the first books that the Image founders created, and to see where Image is now is just leaps and bounds
Yeah.
from where the 7 founders started it. So yeah, I would highly recommend those books as well.
Yeah. If you don't have yourself a run of his Justice League, uh, run out and buy it. You better go online or go to and I'm gonna always say go to one of your Facebook groups and ask somebody who has a run of the Jim Lee's Justice League, because it's amazing. Not only did he draw this team to be larger than life, definitely larger than the Avengers. This was drawn to be an epic story, but we go back to his style again. We go back to the poses. We go back to how waste he doesn't waste space on the comic board for meaningless, let's just black it out, let's just be done with it. There's a whole lot of things that are done intentional, so to create that eye-popping sound, that eye-popping image, but also to gather you as the comic book collector, to gather you into what he's trying to get you to see. He wants you to be part of the action. One of the images for me that really drove home, and I couldn't find the first image that I wanted to, but this image is just as dramatic. If you look at how he's coming out of Earth's atmosphere, it's creating depth. It's creating a sense of he really is Superman. That is, he really is that powerful. There's another scene when in his All-Star Superman where he's entering the Earth's atmosphere and his chest is out and his chest is ablaze and he's coming through. And when you enter the atmosphere, right, like everything is heating up. Well, he drew that image, and it's like characters exit and enter the atmosphere all the time. I don't recall seeing someone illustrate it to where it's scientifically accurate with the comic book flavor to it. You get what I'm saying?
I think it's just his attention to detail again, like the raindrops on his hand. He just thinks about it, I think, in a different way. And to other artists' credit, they just have a different interpretation and a different perspective. Some prefer a little bit more abstract, like Bill Sienkiewicz. Some prefer, again, way more detail, like the great George Perez. They're the styles, again, themselves, they just lend to a certain eye to catch them. And it just so happens Jim Lee catches a lot of eyes because he does pay attention to a lot of detail, but he makes it fluid, dynamic, all those other things that we talked about.
When I look at Jim Lee's art, or I look at a lot of people's art, is that it does have it has a circular motion, right? We know this art is basically, it's not basically, it is flat, right? And we know artists who help us these artists who play with our eyes when we look at something and then we say, I know that's flat, but look at the depth to it. Look how circular it is. Look how we can actually look around it. That's what he does. I mean, if you take a look at his fist hitting the character, we know there's something on the other side because look how he's drawn that other side behind the fist, right?
Yes. You could definitely see that there's depth there.
Right.
From the foreground of the villain that he's hitting, that he's punching into, and then you see the body connected. That's almost in the middle ground.
Right.
So he's in the middle ground. The arm is in the foreground. the leg is in the foreground, and then you've got the background as well that with it looks like asteroids coming through.
Right.
So he's playing with depth to your point where it is a flat page, but everything, he is adding different layers so that it pops to your brain.
When something in the NBA happens and it's extremely big, we hear from LeBron. I look at Jim Lee as him being that way as well. How much would we pay for some Jim Lee art when this, or Jim Lee comic books, if when this comes back? Would we pay an extra $2-3? So would we pay the $7-8.99 for the book when this come back, or would that just be unheard of?
We will pay what Jim Lee wants us to pay. It's as simple as that.
Point taken. Point taken. So with that, you're a big Batman fan, and I have to admit that you draw me into the Batman. Any iconic Batman images that come to mind that are from Jim Lee?
Oh, I mean, pretty much anything from his Hush run. I mean, 608, the cover, the second print cover, the cover to 612 with Superman. I mean, that whole run, I think, is iconic. I think the majority would be from Hush. I think his All-Star stuff was good too, but I think he was going for a little bit of a different style because of how the story flowed. And I think the same thing with Justice League. I think, to me, the Hush Batman that he drew is like the classic Batman.
When I look at this page, even though Jim Lee did his Superman is omnipotent and the most powerful, so of course I got to float and come down and I'm towering over it. I look at the use of the eyes, I look at the use of the body posturing, his body movement, how he looks at Batman, and that those individual pieces is kind of Jim Lee's calling card, right? Like, Batman is not in any way, shape, or form afraid of the most powerful alien on the planet who he's already figured out how to take down. And that comes across, even though I know it based on Batman's, his whole, Batman canon and all the things in his history. But to see Jim Lee's artwork show that exact same feeling is another layer to his art for me,
I know what you're saying. And I think the way he draws, to me, he's probably the top. He's probably my top Batman artist. I mean, maybe there's there might be a tie between him and Tim Sale, but his modern era Batman here is I think everything that was built up to be post, I would say, Grant Morrison's JLA. He's got the ultimate poker face. You could never tell what he's thinking. You could never tell if he's happy or sad. And I think that's purposely done because of how intimidating he's meant to be.
And I've seen other artists draw Batman, and I didn't get that feeling from them like I got that feeling from some Jim Lee art,
Yeah, I could see that. I have a suspicion that pre Hush, he, I don't want to say he was practicing, but maybe he was mentally preparing. Maybe he was mentally training. I think the way he draws and style, I think it's all predicated on how he thinks about things. Because again, he seems like, not that he's methodical, but he thinks through, if I'm going to draw a panel or a page, I'm not thinking about just the protagonist or what's the main character on the page. I'm thinking about everything all at once. So maybe he went through that before, and so he was already prepared to do Hush before it even came out.
Listen, if that was the case, I say let's make sure we give him enough time to think before his next project so he can put just as much great art in that book and in that project as he's done in the past. And I think you're right, Steve, on every single level. We'll pay what Jim Lee wants us to pay, because I can guarantee you when the covers of these books come out, and using these covers that he's working on, these 60 in 60 days, when these covers dawn comic books, oh, we're running for it. And I think it's probably safe to say they're going to be, 1 in 50, 1 in 100, 1 in whatever the case is, to get these covers to even boost it up even more, because we'll pay whatever Jim Lee wants us to pay for some art. We could keep this going on forever and ever, but we probably should draw this to a little close, because we don't want to seem too stalker-ish, because we might stalk Jim Lee for some art. I'm telling y'all. We thank you guys for joining us for another show here at the Comic Book Hit List. We ask you again, come back next time for more great comic book conversation. And like always, like, share, subscribe, and let's keep this train moving forward. And listen, the fastest way we can get the cons back is for everybody to take your home and stay home. Make sure you're washing your hands. Make sure you're wearing your mask and gloves. And please, if you wear gloves, please put your gloves in the trash can. Don't just dump them all over the parking lot, man. And ladies, that's just horrible. I go to the grocery store all the time. There's plastic gloves everywhere. We don't want that. Keep reading. Let's uplift the industry, and let's all be cool with each other, for real. Anything you want to say, any comment, put it down in the comment section, and we'll definitely do our best to get back to you in a timely manner. So from the Comic Book Hit List host, Cool Ty, my man Steve, we want to thank you again for joining us. We're out. You guys have a good evening.
Bye, everyone.